This question tests understanding of trade credit policy and the factors that influence whether a company should liberalize, relax, or tighten its credit standards. A liberal credit policy allows customers more flexibility in payment, which may increase sales but also increases the risk of bad debts and higher investment in accounts receivable. Management should liberalize credit only when the additional profits from increased sales exceed the additional costs of financing receivables and potential credit losses. Each factor should be evaluated individually. Operating at full capacity generally argues against liberalizing credit because the company cannot easily satisfy additional demand. Low borrowing costs make it less expensive to finance larger accounts receivable balances, supporting a more liberal policy. Opportunities for repeat sales increase the long-term value of acquiring customers, making relaxed credit terms more attractive. Low gross margin per unit leaves little profit to absorb additional financing costs or bad debts, suggesting stricter rather than more liberal credit standards. 1. Operating at full capacity. Not appropriate. If production capacity is already fully utilized, encouraging additional sales through easier credit provides little benefit and may strain operations. 2. Low cost of borrowing. Appropriate. Lower financing costs reduce the expense of carrying larger receivables, supporting a more liberal credit policy. 3. Opportunity for repeat sales. Appropriate. Potential long-term customer relationships justify extending credit because future profits may outweigh the initial financing costs. 4. Low gross margin per unit. Not appropriate. Low margins provide less protection against bad debts and collection costs, making liberal credit policies less desirable. 1 and 2 only. Incorrect. Operating at full capacity does not support relaxing credit standards. B. 1, 2 and 3 only. Incorrect. The inclusion of operating at full capacity makes this choice incorrect. C. 2 and 3 only. Correct. Low borrowing costs and opportunities for repeat sales both support a more liberal trade credit policy. D. 3 and 4 only. Incorrect. Low gross margins generally argue against expanding credit. Correct answer. C. 2 and 3 only. Exam tip. Companies should liberalize trade credit when the incremental profits from higher sales exceed the costs of financing receivables and expected bad debts. Low financing costs and strong repeat customer potential encourage liberal credit, while capacity constraints and low profit margins favor stricter credit policies. This question tests the evaluation of trade credit versus bank borrowing. When suppliers offer cash discount terms, a company must decide whether to pay early and take the discount or delay payment and forego the discount. The supplier's terms are February 10th, net 45, meaning the buyer receives a 2% discount if payment is made within 10 days. Otherwise, the full amount is due in 45 days. If Global does not take the discount, it is effectively paying 2% more for the privilege of delaying payment by only 35 additional days, from day 10 to day 45. This represents a very high implied annual financing cost, which is much greater than the company's borrowing rate of 12%. Therefore, it is financially advantageous for Global to borrow at 12% if necessary, pay within 10 days, and obtain the 2% discount. The savings from the discount exceed the interest cost of borrowing. The key principle is to compare the implicit cost of supplier credit with the alternative borrowing cost. Choose the cheaper source of financing. Yes, the cost of not taking the trade discount exceeds the cost of borrowing. Correct. The implied financing cost of giving up a 2% discount for only 35 additional days is substantially higher than the 12% borrowing rate. Therefore, the company should pay early and take the discount. B. No, the cost of trade credit exceeds the cost of borrowing. Incorrect. Although the first statement is true, The conclusion is wrong. Because supplier credit is more expensive, the company should not forego the discount. C. No, the use of debt should be avoided if possible. Incorrect. Debt should be used when it provides a lower financing cost than alternative sources. D. The answer depends on whether the company borrows money. Incorrect. The decision depends on relative financing costs, not on whether borrowing actually occurs. Correct answer. Yes, the cost of not taking the trade discount exceeds the cost of borrowing. Exam tip. Cash discounts such as 2/10, net 45 often imply a very high annual financing cost if ignored. If the bank borrowing rate is lower than the implied cost of trade credit, the financially optimal decision is to borrow if necessary and take the discount. This question tests understanding of the economic order quantity (EOQ) model, one of the most important inventory management tools in operations and finance. The EOQ model determines the optimal order size that minimizes the total cost of inventory, balancing ordering costs against holding, carrying costs. The basic EOQ model is built on several simplifying assumptions. Demand is assumed to be known and constant. Replenishment occurs at a predictable rate. Lead time is known with certainty, and shortages or stockouts do not occur. The model also assumes that unit purchase price remains constant regardless of order quantity, meaning there are no quantity discounts. Finally, whenever inventory reaches the reorder point, the company places the same fixed order quantity, which is the EOQ. The question asks which assumptions belong to the basic EOQ model. Since all four statements reflect standard EOQ assumptions, the correct answer includes every item listed. I. The same fixed quantity is ordered at each reorder point. Correct. The EOQ model assumes that every replenishment order is the same optimal quantity, keeping inventory management consistent. 2. Purchasing costs are unaffected by the quantity ordered. Correct. The basic EOQ model assumes a constant purchase price with no volume discounts, so purchasing cost per unit does not change. 3. Purchase order lead time is known with certainty. Correct. Lead time is assumed to be constant and predictable, allowing the reorder point to be determined accurately. 4. Adequate inventory is always maintained to avoid stockouts. Correct. The basic EOQ model assumes no shortages occur because orders arrive before inventory is depleted. Correct answer. D. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Exam tip. The basic EOQ model assumes constant demand, constant lead time, no quantity discounts, fixed order quantities, and no stockouts. If any of these assumptions are relaxed, such as uncertain demand or quantity discounts, a more advanced inventory model is generally required. This question tests understanding of inventory carrying costs, holding costs, an important concept in working capital management, and the economic order quantity (EOQ) model. Carrying costs represent the expenses incurred by holding inventory over time. Companies seek to minimize these costs while maintaining sufficient inventory to meet customer demand. Typical carrying costs include storage costs such as warehouse rent, utilities, and handling expenses, insurance costs, which protect inventory against theft, fire, or other losses, opportunity costs, representing the return that could have been earned if the money invested in inventory had been invested elsewhere. Other carrying costs may include taxes, obsolescence, deterioration, and shrinkage. The question asks for the item that is not considered a carrying cost. Students should distinguish between holding inventory and acquiring inventory. Shipping costs are generally incurred when purchasing or transporting goods and are classified as ordering or acquisition costs, not carrying costs. A. Storage costs. Incorrect. Storage costs are a classic inventory carrying cost because they arise from maintaining inventory in warehouses or storage facilities. B. Insurance. Incorrect. Insurance premiums paid to protect inventory are part of the cost of holding inventory, and therefore are carrying costs. C. Shipping costs. Correct. Shipping costs are generally associated with obtaining inventory from suppliers. They are acquisition or ordering costs rather than costs of holding inventory. D. Opportunity costs. Incorrect. Capital invested in inventory cannot be invested elsewhere, so the foregone return represents an opportunity cost and is a major component of carrying costs. Correct answer. C. Shipping costs. Exam tip. Remember that inventory costs are often divided into ordering costs and carrying costs. Carrying costs include storage, insurance, taxes, obsolescence, and opportunity costs, while shipping and order processing costs are typically associated with acquiring inventory, not holding it. This distinction is frequently tested in EOQ and working capital management questions.